Hello. Hi, Symph. This is Darren, or dazzletag, or whatever. I've just watched your video on moral conviction, which is very. I mustn't touch my face. Which is very interesting. You raised a lot of interesting points, as always. I think that on if you're thinking about morals, because what your question seemed to be was, why do we have morals and how can they all be right, and how can eating meat be right and not eating meat be wrong at the same time, both be true? And I think you're highlighting the problem with moral relativism. And in its one sense, you could think of it as being, one person says red is the best color, and another person says blue is the best color. How can they both be correct? And of course, what they mean is, I believe that red is the best, and another person says I believe that blue is the best. And in those conditions, using those terms, they're both correct. They both do believe what they say is true. What they're attempting, if you deconstruct it and say what are they actually attempting to do when they say meat eating is wrong and another person says meat eating is right, is because they've got some underlying assumptions or principles that say things like, do you believe that cruelty to animals is bad? And most people say, yes, I believe that's true. Another person, and another principle might be saying is, do you think that all killing is bad? And some people say yes. And you build up these assumptions that are underpinning. And what they say is, when they say meat eating is wrong, is because they're assuming you think, and you're holding in your head all of those assumptions at the same time. So what they're actually talking about is, do they believe these certain things to be true? Whether or not something is moral is, as you all recognise, I think is a very tricky proposition. I think you need to decide what you want morals. At the end of the day, morals are there because there are competing desires. So those desires that say, somebody says, I don't want to eat meat, I do want to eat meat. You've got some competition of desire there, because one person is desiring that the other person stops either saying what they're saying or stops doing what they're doing. So that's where I think morals and morality come from, because you have all of these competing desires. Now, where religion's tried in the past to make desires uniform, so to say, right, everybody in society thinks X, so it's a lot easier to create laws and get along together, because we all are trying to aim in the same direction and trying to do the best for our children. So, for example, with the sex education thing, everybody is balancing up in their heads what's best. List those assumptions. Assuming I want what's best for my child, assuming that child is going to come into contact with sex, assuming that sex is a powerful, wonderful thing, but it's also potential, as you recognise, a source of potential harm as well. And there's some of those harmful things are sexually transmitted diseases, and you have to think, well, it is best to teach the children about sex prior to them becoming really, really, really interested in it. So prior to puberty is when you should really teach children about sex. Whether it's the parents or the teachers is a function of who has the most accurate facts and who is best placed to pass on that information. You merely have to decide that information is beneficial to your child, which I think in all cases it is. You have the issue of, well, does the parent do it or does the teacher do it? It isn't a moral question. It's a question about who has the most accurate, who is best at completing the task. I.e., you input a child. If the output is child knows enough not to get chlamydia, gonorrhea, hepatitis, things like that, then job done. It is harmful if to withhold health information from a child is potentially harmful. I would say that's correct, and I would assume that a lot of people know this. You wouldn't say, if you, the classic one of the classic arguments would be, somebody um, gets bitten by a snake and there's an anti-venom in the hospital, or there's a church saying, well, you just need to pray and it'll stop. You need, in order to make a good decision, you need full information. Bertrand Russell said that the good life was one inspired by love and guided by knowledge. So you say, well, the love to want to protect your child is there. You do need, though, the knowledge to know how best to protect that child's health. And that knowledge might come from an educational source. And we're talking about quality. I'm not, there's no point in saying, well, there's crazy parents and there's crazy teachers. How, you can't possibly decide. You can decide. You don't want to be sending a child to a school where you think there's crazy out there teachers. So, I think you've got to make that kind of decision. So, yeah, I think that is my view on moral convictions, is that, boiled down, morals are there in order to allow people to all live together at the same time. And there's two sides of it. You can have the totalitarian or theocracy, where you say, right, the laws of the land are basically going to be this code of law, this set of morality. Now, whether that comes from the Bible or somebody's head, what you end up with is one set of rules, and it minimises the amount of interpersonal conflict within that nation. So if you have on the other side a pluralistic society where you've got all these laws, but they're all different. They're all coming from different sources. They're all trying to address different things. You have a lot of conflict. So in America, for example, you might say that there's a set of rules, not legislated laws, but there's a set of rules that say you should want as much wealth as possible. And somebody might go out and say, right, well, okay, that is a value I hold and I've driven into me, but they interpret that as being, well, I'm going to go and steal it. Well, you've also got this other set of rules out there that says you mustn't steal. So you have a lot of conflict because you have the things that people desire, lots of money in that society, conflicts with other desires, the desires for law and order. So you have to bring in morality to say, well, greed isn't always good, and greed is, temper greed and all that sort of thing. And I'm probably not making very much sense now, but that I think is what morality is about, and why it matters. At the end of the day, you are totally responsible for your child's upbringing. You can't say, oh well, I allowed crazy teachers to tell my kids that sex is done with babies are made with stalks, for example. That's irresponsible, and that whether the teacher tells the child that or you tell it, you're responsible for your child. So, I mean, if you, and if that child grows up and is ill because you haven't told them, because sex should not be stigmatised. It's a perfectly normal human function. One of the biggest problems with the church is that they condemn things that are harmless, and they promote things that are positively harmful. One of those things is the stigmatisation of sex. If you have somebody who, if you bring up a child who feels they can't talk to you about sex, they can't talk to you about relationships, they might be getting that information from somebody who wants to have sex with them. So, if you're bringing up a daughter, say, and her only source of information about when she should have sex with, or anything like that, is her lusty boyfriend, you may regret not educating her sooner or later. So, as always, though, I only have the greatest admiration for your videos. So, all this is with tremendous respect for you. So, hopefully I haven't said anything inflammatory or anything like that to get you riled up with a knee-jerk reaction. But anyway, I will speak to you later. Bye-bye.